Internal Affairs at the Medical School for International Health. Combined, we've been doing medical school admissions probably for over 15 years now. So the purpose of this whole webinar series is really just to give you a little bit of insight into the medical school admissions process. Beth and I both have children of our own, been in college and everything else, and we know the stress that's associated with applying to medical school. So we try to do these sessions just to give you a little bit of insight into the process and make you perhaps feel a little more at ease about the process. So we're going to get started. We will open up for questions at the end. We're going to go through a brief presentation about mastering the medical school interview. And then from there, we will open it up for some Q&A. Just a reminder, if you want to put your video on, that's great, totally up to you, but please mute your line until the end when we do open it up for questions. So without further ado, we're going to move right into the information part of our session. So again, this is the final of our 4-part series on the medical school admissions process. This whole series has been extremely well attended. So thank you for everyone who's attended these workshops that we've done. It's definitely something we're going to do again next year. They seem to be very interactive, and I think the prospective students really appreciate it. So the first part of mastering the medical school interview is really boils down to preparation. As with anything you do in life, there's that old saying that you don't prepare to fail, you just fail to prepare. And that is definitely the case when it comes to the medical school admissions interview. Most medical schools, they're not trying to trick you or do anything else. They're just trying to get to know you, know a little more about you besides what they already know from your CV, your recommendations, and the rest of your application that you've submitted, your essays, etc. So interview preparation is really key so that you can really put your best foot forward on the day of the interview. So there's a lot of steps to preparing for an interview. The first step is doing some research. Research as much as you can so that you're as comfortable as you can on the day of the interview, so you know what to anticipate. So the first thing you should be researching is the format of the interview. When the admissions office reaches out to you, they may tell you that it's going to be a panel interview. They may tell you it's going to be an information session, and then you're going to be interviewing with one person at a time. They may tell you you'll be interviewing in a group setting. So really knowing the format, I think, just gives you a little bit of a comfort level, so you're not caught off guard the day of the interview. So know as much as you can about the format. Hopefully the medical school tells you some of that information. I know we do. But if not, it is okay just to ask what the format will be the day of the interview. The other thing is research the institution. And we're going to get into this a little more detailed when we talk about the questions that you should be prepared to answer. But definitely research the institution where you are interviewing at. Know where you're interviewing, know about them, and be able to answer why this school, why you are interviewing here. Sometimes you know the following information, sometimes you don't, and that is who is interviewing you. If you're given that information in advance, with Google nowadays, you can find out so much. You go Google the person, see what their position is, if they're a physician at a hospital, what they're doing, if they've published, if you can go on LinkedIn and research them, just so that you have an idea. Maybe you've done similar research to something they've done. Maybe they're an oncologist and you're interested in going into oncology. So just know who is going to be interviewing you that day. If you're given that information, do some research. Look them up online. It doesn't require a lot of work, but just a little bit. Again, it puts you at ease that day and it makes you look really prepared. The next part of the interview preparation is knowing your application. This is pretty much the same as if you were going on a medical school interview or a job interview. Know what's on your CV or resume. Know what you have on there, what research you've done, what volunteer work you've done, different leadership positions you have. Know what you have on there. Be able to answer anything about any information you've given on your CV. The same thing goes for your essays and your personal statement. The interviewer has read everything you've submitted them. So it's really fair game for them to ask you anything about what's in your CV, in your essays, or in your personal statement. If you wrote about a challenge that you had as an undergrad, you put it out there, now they can ask you some questions about that. So just really be prepared to answer those questions. So know what you've written and know what you've submitted already. Practice, practice, practice. And this can be in the format, usually your pre-health advisor is a great resource for this, or a career center at your university. I know they'll videotape nowadays. You interviewing and going through a mock interview, making sure you have good eye contact and things like that. You can practice in front of a mirror. You can practice with your roommate. You can practice with a family member. Just practice. Be prepared. Again, it puts you more at ease. And it really just makes you look prepared for that day up. We're going to talk about some of the questions later that may come up in the interview. So if you've practiced going through them and know roughly what you're going to say for each of them, you don't want to seem over rehearsed, but you definitely want to seem like you've prepared for the interview. And by practicing and going through the things, that makes you look prepared. And finally, prepare questions to ask. I know I always ask students during interviews if they have any questions. Some of our interviewers start off by asking if the student has any questions before they even ask any questions on their own. So really be prepared. Don't just ask questions for the sake of asking them, but definitely have a few questions prepared that may be about something you want to know about, whether it's research, whether it's the curriculum, whether it's housing, whatever it is. Do your homework on the school's website and have questions prepared to ask the person who's interviewing you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. Kelly started by our presentation in sharing with you preparation, and that follows through to your interview day. With your preparation, prepare the day prior to your actual interview. The evening before is a good time to get started. Make sure that you get a good night's sleep. It sounds so basic, but there's many of interviewees are very nervous or jittery, and a good night's sleep will help you be fresh and be sharp and at your best. Remember, you want to try to put your best foot forward. And also in preparing for your interview day, think about how you are going to prepare yourself. How are you going to present yourself? Your first impression will be visual, whether it's in person or whether it is on Zoom. What will you wear to your interview? Make sure that you dress professionally. You don't want to show up wearing sweatshirts or be too casual. You don't need to wear your tuxedo or best outfit either, but you want to be a professional setting. Dress professionally. Now that also means make sure if you prepare the evening before, it seems obvious, but you want to make sure that you don't take out your best shirt and there's a stain on it. The idea here is to make yourself as at ease and comfortable in your interview. And if you prepare the evening before, that will all be checked and you'll be ready for that interview. The day of your interview, be punctual. Whether you're joining again virtually or in person, don't arrive late. This is not the occasion to be fashionably late for a meeting. You want to try to arrive perhaps a few minutes before your interview. If you're meeting in person and not virtually, perhaps give yourself time to gather yourself, put your coat away. 15 minutes seems appropriate. And if you're meeting on Zoom, there's nothing wrong with hopping on 5 minutes before your meeting. With your preparation, make sure that everything is set for your Zoom interview if you are meeting virtually. Is your Wi-Fi working? Is your computer working? You don't want a situation where all of a sudden you realize that I haven't updated my Zoom. Make sure that everything is up to date. There we go, just wanted to mute. Please, just a reminder, we will accept questions at the end, so just remember to mute yourselves. When preparing your setting, also think about where you will be having your Zoom interview. What room are you going to have it in? Make sure the background behind you is aesthetic. Is aesthetic to the eye. If you have to do an interview in your bedroom, and that's fine, many students are very limited in their surroundings, make your bed, make sure the setting behind you is neat, or use a virtual setting that might make your setting seem more professional. On your interview, make sure you talk to your interviewer. If you start being distracted, looking around, looking at notes, you will lose that connection. Remember, your goal here is to make a connection with your interviewer and let them get to know you better. Maintain eye contact. Show interest in what they're asking you, and make sure you listen. If you maintain eye contact and concentrate on what they're saying, you'll be able to answer their questions in a way that providing them with the information they're looking for, and not your pre-arranged answers. Yes, it's great to have some answers ready, but make sure that you are listening to your interviewer and paying attention to the cues that they are giving you. Many interviews now will also have a group element where they will place you with other people interviewing. This is common on medical school interviews and job interviews as well. In these type of settings, the interviewer is trying to see not just how you interact with them, but how would you potentially interact with your peers, with your fellow students. With that in mind, if you're in a group setting, always remember to be considerate and polite with the other members in the group. Introduce yourself. If you walk into a room, that's the first thing you want to know. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? Be considerate in terms of timing that you take in a group setting. You want to make sure that you are part of the discussion, but you do not want to dominate the discussion and not allow for others in the group to have an opportunity to speak as well. Make sure you don't interrupt people, and just as you were being interested in your interviewer one-on-one, be interested in what your peers have to say. It's a great learning opportunity, and it's also a great opportunity for the applicant to see other people who are applying, to see, yes, these are people I could see myself going to medical school with the next 4 years. And the last item for your interview day is that depth of understanding. Kelly touched on this a bit a few moments ago. Do your research. This again relates to preparation. Go into, make sure that you have depth for your answers. Depth not just about the institution of where you are applying, but what you are applying for. Make sure that the interviewer has an understanding and knows that you know what it means to be a physician, that you have an understanding of the career path of which you are choosing, and not just taking it lightly from what you have seen on television or read in a very superficial manner. Show a depth that might be presented already on your CV in some of your experience. So take the opportunity to highlight some of those experience or some of your volunteer work or whatever you feel might aid the interviewer to understand that you have a depth of what it means to be a physician. By the same token, be careful there. You don't want to just regurgitate everything that is on your school's website. We know what's on that website. You don't need to show us that you read the website. It's assumed you will have done that research, but integrate that knowledge into your experiences. And that's a better way of showing you have done your research. Let's move on a little bit now to some of the questions that come up on the actual interview.
Thanks, Beth. And I'm really going to expand a lot upon what Beth just said about depth of understanding. When you prepare for a medical school interview and practice interview questions, keep in mind why medical schools interview. What are they trying to figure out about you or find out about you that they don't already know based on everything you've submitted? That really is the crux of how you should go about answering your questions. Medical schools interview for a variety of reasons. They want to see your personality. They want to see your professionalism, your maturity, your cultural awareness, your motivation to be a doctor. They want to see if you'll be a good classmate, a good colleague one day as a physician. And they want to see that you have the depth to you, that you're not a shallow person, that you really have a depth of understanding about yourself and about the world around you. So with that, we're going to go over some of the questions that typically come up. I know a lot of our interviewers ask these types of questions, and I think in general, they're just common for most medical school interviews. So the first one's the most basic one. I start every interview with this question: tell me about yourself. I've read everything you've submitted, but tell me about yourself. And for friends of yours who may be going on job interviews, or if you've gone on job interviews before, career centers often refer to this as an elevator pitch. What do you want somebody to know about you in a short period of time when what can you say about yourself in that period of time? So it's really just a succinct summary about yourself. I ask that question not only because I want to hear what the person has to say, but I really am curious where the person takes that question. Are they going to start back when they were in childhood and their family and then their undergrad and what interests them? And that's fine. Some of them start in college and talk about some of their experiences and what led them to medical school. Some will tell me more personal information than others. Whatever an applicant tells me is great. I just like to see how they go, what direction they take that question in. And it really tells us a little bit about how you view yourself, how you think the rest of the world views you, I should say. So that's really, we're not looking for anything specific. It's not a trick question. We're just trying to get to know you a little bit better and know how you view yourself and what you think is important in your life or about you to share with the interviewers. So that is a very common question. And again, it's tell me about yourself, what's your elevator pitch, etc. The second question we've touched upon a little bit already, but why medicine? Why a physician? And this really, again, shows your preparation, shows why you want to be a doctor. Some students may say they've always known they want to be a doctor. Their parent was a physician. They were exposed to medicine at a young age. A lot of other people will tell us they had a medical issue themselves, or a family member had a medical issue themselves, and that really exposed them to medicine. Some students just liked science. They went into undergrad as a science major, and through volunteer work determined they wanted to be a physician. Again, here, this is really a question that's going to display your depth, display the amount of research you've done, really that you've tested and confirmed why you want to be a physician, why you want to go into medicine, and why you want to be a physician specifically. Why not a doctor, or why not a nurse or a PT or something like that. And it also is an opportunity for you to display that you have a realistic expectation of what it is a physician does and what a physician's life is like, etc. So this is really your chance to say what motivated you to this, what got you to this point in your life that you're applying to medical school. And it should be more than just watching Grey's Anatomy. It should be through the experiences that you've had that have led you down this road. Again, this is a very holistic question. It's just the medical schools trying to get to know why you want to be a doctor. The next question we've talked about a little bit too is why us? Why our school? And this comes a lot from if you've talked to any alumni, if you visited the school, if you've done research about the school, if you've had correspondence with the school. And this is really, it may be the teaching of the school, it may be the curriculum of the school, it may be the mission of the school. We'll talk a little bit more about MSIH later. In terms of what we specifically look for, but often our mission statement is what makes students want to go to MSIH. So really just do your research about why this school in particular. Your answer should be specific enough so that you can't give it to every other medical school that you're interviewing with. It should be specific to that school, but again, like Beth said, it doesn't need to be a regurgitation of the information that's in the brochure or on the website. We know what that is. We want to use this answer to highlight what you've done and how that makes you a good fit for this school in particular. The next question is a basic one. Again, a lot of people ask, and it's a job interview question as well. What are your strengths and weaknesses? So really think about that. Think about what I said before, that schools are looking for students who are going to be good peers, good colleagues. They collaborate, they work well in group settings, but they can also work individually. They want people who are professional, who are mature, different characteristics like that. Everybody's going to have different answers for strengths and weaknesses, and that's fine. That's what makes everybody unique. But definitely think about that. Do some, soul searching, and really think about what your strengths and weaknesses. What are you going to bring to that medical school is kind of your strengths. And what are you working on? Maybe you've had a challenge. If you've answered a question, what's your biggest challenge? Your weaknesses might come through there. Or if you had a bad grade at one point, your weaknesses, how you learned from that. So you can tie weakness really into a positive in the end when you talk about what you learned from that experience. But it really just shows a level of self-awareness that you can identify your strengths and weaknesses, because everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. If everyone can just mute their lines, that would be great. And then finally, the last question is a situational question. These again are big on medical school interviews, they're big on job interviews, and they're just the basic tell me a time when. So they really want you to reference a specific situation when you dealt with something. So it could be tell me a time when you went above and beyond what was expected of you. And you should have an answer. You should be prepared for those types of questions, that you're ready to talk about a different scenario. Again, you don't want to sound rehearsed, but you should be able to think about that and come up with it. Tell me about a time when you were faced with an ethical dilemma. Ethics are very important in medical school interviews. They want to accept students who are going to be ethical physicians. So that's a big question that could come up. Or tell me a time when you were in a group setting and you faced some challenges because of different personalities in the group. Again, they're looking for a student who's going to be a good classmate, a good colleague one day. So those are the things that we're looking for. Really just prepare different situations. You can Google search, tell me a time when type questions, but you should definitely have a few different things that you've done on your resume that you can highlight when you get asked these tell me a time when. And again, we're looking for not so much the challenges you faced or different situations. It's really looking for how you grew from the different challenges or different things you faced. So we're looking for personal growth, self-awareness, awareness of the world around you, awareness of others. That's what these interview questions are getting at. They're looking for character traits, looking for self-awareness, and really looking that you've done your homework, that you know what you're talking about, you know why you want to be a physician, you know why you want to go to this school, etc. So this all, again, the interview questions all come back to what we talked about before: research and preparation, so that on the day of the interview, you can put your best foot forward. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Beth.
Thank you, Kelly. After your interview is complete, you still should do some follow-up. You want to reach out and thank your interviewers. Thank the person who's coordinated your interviews. Thank the people, all the people that you have met with. This should be done in a timely manner. It doesn't mean that the minute that your interview is over, you need to run to do your thank you. But try to get it done within 48 hours. Don't wait a week before you wake up to do that thank you. By demonstrating that thank you in a timely manner, you're showing you were excited about these interviews, that this is a school where you would like to follow through. And also, when you do your thank yous, make sure you know it. Ask, do they need any other information? Do you want to learn more? Make yourself accessible in case there is any follow-up that the interviewers would like to know. When you do your thank yous, it could be done by email or it could be done by snail mail. I do recommend email primarily. It gets to your interviewers quicker, and you know it's going to get there. You have the email of certainly the person who has coordinated your interviews, and in some cases they will be able to share with you committee member emails. If not, you could always pass on thank yous through them. It's much more efficient than handwritten notes, although handwritten notes historically might seem more personable. Certainly in the days of COVID, I don't recommend them. Many people are working remotely. By the time that thank you actually gets to your interviewer, it'll be months later. So I would recommend doing it on email. When you write your thank you, don't just use the shell that you've used for every interview you've gone on. Have that thank you be unique. Let the interviewer know that there was some sort of connection that was made, that you learned something. Did you learn something from any of the questions that you asked and didn't know before? Thank them for sharing that information with you. You want to know that if there was some sort of personal connection that you had with your interviewer, raise that on your thank you. It was great to hear, to speak with another person who graduated the same school that I did, volunteered in the same organization I did. Or if some of you might be interviewing with alumni of the school, thank them if you asked them about the sharing and of their experiences. What you want to do in the thank you is not just demonstrate that you know how to be polite, but that you listened, that you walked away from your interview with knowledge, not that the interviewers, that it was a two-way communication. You learned about the organization and the school just like they learned about you. And that is the reason why you're thanking them, for their time and their sharing information. After your interview, you will probably receive some sort of time frame on which you will be hearing back. That's actually a great question to ask on your interview. When will I hear back? In most cases, most schools give, depending on the timing of where you are in the cycle, you might receive anywhere from 1 week to a month. Spoken with several pre-health advisors, and really very few schools will give you more than that. Use that time effectively. That is the time for you to do your due diligence. That is the time for you to look into any outstanding questions that you may have. Do you have any concerns that perhaps were not addressed in your interviews? If so, do your research. Now's your time to reach out to the admissions office and let them connect you with people that can address some of your questions and concerns. What that will do is prepare you for the deadlines that will be given to you should there be an offer of admission. Offers of admission are set when they are extended to students. They have the deadline of when the students need to respond. And in most cases, those are firm, which is why you need to take advantage of that time so that if there is an offer, you might not need all the time they give you. You will know that answer already. This is a school I would like to go to. This is where I want to do my medical school education. So if you do your due diligence and you have all those questions answered during this waiting period, it'll be a much easier decision for you when you have to weigh your options. Also respect the deadlines. Make sure you read those letters when they come in. If the letter says you need your response in by March 3rd, make sure your response is there by March 3rd. I would not recommend waiting for that last day that's on those letters of offering admission. I can't tell you how many times I've confronted students who at the last minute, there's an issue with the bank, or their Wi-Fi goes down, or they don't have access to a computer that day. Don't wait till that last day. You don't want to lose your offer of admission for a technicality. So be aware of your deadlines, respect your deadlines, and try to get an answer to the office a couple of days before. Now, those are all, everything Kelly and I have shared with you are really true for any medical school that you're applying to. These are interview preparations, questions, follow-up that are really can be used no matter what medical school you are applying to. Obviously, at the medical school at International Health, what I would like to do now is share with you some of the specifics for our school. How do we treat a lot of these areas, the application, the interview, what we look for in our students, to give you a little bit of insight into our program. When we receive an application, it is immediately, well, let me take a step back. We begin accepting applications in July, of the July for the year prior to when you would be matriculating. Sometimes in July, August, September, we will already begin receiving data on applicants. We are often asked, can I arrange for my letters of recommendation or my transcripts to be sent to your office, but I do not have my application ready. That's fine. We will open up an admissions file as soon as we start receiving data for any applicant. The application, though, will not be put through the review cycle until it is complete. When we will receive an application, the initial review is done by the Director of Admissions. It will be reviewed for thoroughness. Have the applicant submitted all the requested data? Have they sent in the transcripts, all post-high school transcripts? Have they sent in the letters of recommendation that we requested? Have they sent in an academic referee? Have they supplied the information we need to verify your MCAT score? That is done on the initial review. At that point, after the initial review, it will be forwarded from the Director of Admissions to one of the co-chairs of the admissions committee. She will at that point review your file in depth. You've already determined whether you have done the requisite coursework, but now she will do a thorough review of your transcripts, read every single aspect of your application, read your essays, your CV, everything we've asked for, and will determine if we will be offering you an interview. If an interview is offered, then it is sent back to the admissions office, at which point we will extend an offer to interview for admission. There are interview days that are set each month, and these are set days. Historically, prior to the pandemic, all of our interviews were done in person. They were conducted either in our New York office or in Israel. And applicants had the option to choose which office they wanted to have their interview. Once the pandemic started, we're actually almost at the 2-year mark now, we switched immediately to virtual interviews. All our interviews are conducted on Zoom. So again, that importance of a Wi-Fi connection is very important. But the virtual interviews, other than the fact that they are over Zoom, really are consistent with how we met with our applicants in person. We use this time to get to know the applicant and in several modes. The actual interview is the interview visit, I call it an interview day, is broken into 3 segments. Those consist of 3 one-hour segments, 2 by members of our admissions committee who will interview the applicant one-on-one, and 1 is shared session, an information session, where I will meet with every applicant in a group setting. Typically, it's anywhere from 2 to possibly 4 applicants at the same time. This is an opportunity where we share information again about the program in more depth and perhaps what you learned in your preparation, and also gives you an opportunity to interact with other applicants to see where they're coming from. Perhaps they have questions that would be of interest to you as well. Our interview days are set based on the availability of our committee members. Our committee members are a dynamic group, very accomplished group of individuals. They come from both the medical sphere, from private sector, and they are accomplished in their fields. Some, for instance, were heads of the American Cancer Society, cystic fibrosis. Some are on staff at Columbia University Medical School, where we have a very close relationship. And they come from other spheres as well, nursing programs, surgeons, and so forth. What they all have a familiarity with our program. Many have been with us for many years. Many of the members have gone over and teach modules on the program. So they're very familiar with the school, with the curriculum. And if they don't have the answers to some of your questions, they will refer you to either myself or I will refer you to the correct person. We also have on our committee member alumni. Our alumni pool now, our school is approximately 20 plus years old, and many of the alumni would like to give back, and they love to stay there, believe in the mission of the school, and they're grateful for the opportunity they had when they were MSIH students. They share that through interviews and by working with us on the committee, on the admissions committee. After your interview day is complete, we get write-ups from everybody that you meet with. Those write-ups are added to your admissions file. Your file is then presented to the entire admissions committee. So you see there's several reviews of one's admissions application. It's not just one person, it goes through a committee. The admissions committee will view every single applicant that we have invited to interview. And they will give a thorough review to get an understanding of that applicant to see if they are an appropriate fit for our school. We will look at every aspect, their academics, their volunteer work, and so forth, and how they interacted with the interviewers and with other applicants. Excuse me. Again, we've already spoken about what we've spoken in vague terms what medical schools are looking for. At MSIH, we're looking for a strong student. The average GPA of an MSIH student is 3.6 with an average MCAT of 509. But we do look at all applications holistically. We will look at service, your volunteer work. We will look at academic trends. And there are various opportunities through the review processes that I have already delineated for your application to be reviewed to show that, yes, they did not do well their freshman year, but there was a reason. They wrote about it in their essay. We look at academic trends. We will read those letters of recommendation that are written to get greater insight to our students. We are looking for applicants that are compassionate, that are committed to service, that have a demonstrated commitment to service. That doesn't necessarily mean they need to have traveled far and wide to volunteer in places, but it does mean that they could have reached out even within their own community. Kelly, I'll let you elaborate a little bit more here.
Sure. Thanks, Beth. Yes, as Beth said, we really take a holistic approach to the admissions process. So as she said, we go through your transcripts. We're looking for grade trends. We're looking for how you did in your science courses. We're really looking at everything, not just a GPA. We're not just looking at a number. Your MCAT, we're going to look at how you did in your MCAT overall, how you did in different sections of your MCAT. Perhaps you didn't have a great grade in chemistry, but you really performed well on the MCAT for chemistry, or vice versa. So we're really looking at everything, not just looking at the raw numbers of GPA and MCAT scores. And as Beth said, we're looking for what you've done, what you're passionate about, what you've done outside of the classroom. So we're not looking for somebody who just has checked all the boxes to make sure that they volunteered, they've done research, they've done their things that they were supposed to do to apply to medical school. That really comes through both in a CV, in your essays, and in your interviews. We're looking for somebody who's done things that they are passionate about, that they're committed to. So perhaps they did some tutoring, but they really took that through all 4 years of undergrad and, were a TA. They did a lot of things related to being a tutor and a TA and things like that, rather than them just listing that as one of the multiple things they have on their application. Volunteer work, again, as Beth said, we have some students who go off and they do medical mission trips. How beneficial they are to different communities is really up for debate nowadays. So that's definitely not something. It's great if you've done one, but if you've done one, we're looking to find out what you learned from that. How could you compare the healthcare system there to the healthcare system here? What would you have done differently? What do you think could have been improved? So really what you've taken away from all of those different experiences, but you don't have to have gone and done something in a third world country or somewhere else. There's plenty of populations here in the US where you could volunteer. Have you done some shadowing? Have you volunteered in a local clinic? One of my favorite, actually, I should say two of the favorite things that I've interviewed people that they talked about, and it's not just because they did them. One, what they did was unique, but two, they really talked very passionately about what they did. I had a student that I interviewed a bunch of years back who most of his volunteer work was teaching prisoners to read. And he was very passionate about that and talked about how he expanded the program in his school. And it was really just fascinating what he did with it. And then his commitment to it came very through in his interview. And then the other is one of our third year students who we actually wrote about in an article today, who she did a lot of work with hospice as an undergrad. And we see students volunteer in all aspects of medicine, whether it's being a scribe, being a hospital volunteer, volunteering in a clinic, etc. But we don't see many volunteer in hospice. And she really just talked about what she got out of that experience, what she gave in that experience, her insights onto really how to comfort somebody, comfort a family during those final stages of life. So those were just two experiences that I took away over the past 8 years of interviewing people that were really impactful, that they stuck with me, not so much because of what the experience was, but because what the person had to say about that and how passionate they were about that. So we're looking for what makes you tick, what makes you go and do these experiences, and what do you learn from them. So yes, we want to see on your CV, that you've done different things. Research is great. It's not a requirement to apply to MSIH, but if you're passionate about your research and you've done a lot and you've published and whatever you've done in that experience, it's just great to hear all the different things that students have to tell us about what they've been doing, in the years preparing for medical school. And again, we're not looking for one particular cookie cutter applicant that would make our class really boring. We're looking for students who have all different experiences and all different backgrounds and can really talk about those and tell us what they're going to bring to MSIH, so that we can see if they're really a good fit for our program. Fit is important. And remember on your interview, no matter where you're interviewing, but I know for us, we really want to see a student that they think we're a good fit and we think they're a good fit. Fit goes both ways. So that is definitely something. Fit is what we look for in these interviews. I talked before about what we look for in terms of personalities. Again, not a cookie cutter personality, but somebody who's ethical, somebody who's professional, somebody who likes to learn, a lifelong learner, somebody who's culturally aware, somebody who has depth, somebody who's motivated. And you can talk about different experiences. You can highlight them in your CV, your essay, etc. But that's what we're looking for. It's not one particular thing. It's the whole package that we're really looking for, and that's that whole holistic approach to medicine. But our students do so much work at MSIH, volunteering in the local community, whether it's the Bedouin villages, with Save a Child's Heart, with the Teddy Bear Hospital, at Soroka University Medical Center. Our students, that's the one thing that I would say all of our students are very passionate about, and that is volunteering and giving back to the community and making a difference through medicine. So that is definitely something that we look for in terms of applicants. Yes, again, research is great. If you have that, students do research at BGU and at MSIH. There's a ton of opportunities. MSIH is small with only 30 to 40 students per year. but BGU has 20,000 students, Ben Gurion University. So there's a plethora of opportunities for research. So that's great if you've done that. But really volunteering and commitment to service is something that we take very seriously. Our students are, our program is founded on the mission of global health and educating physicians who are more globally aware, culturally sensitive. So anything that displays those types of traits and values and commitments are definitely something that we look for at MSIH. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a minute. You don't have to write these down because you can definitely just Google search MSIH and we'll come up. And then our email is there as well, but that's on our website. I will follow up with every single one of you so that you have our email addresses as well. This is a great picture just taken this year, I think about a month ago, of our students in Israel. That's, I think, in the medical archive facility area, but that's just some of our first and second year students there. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and open it up. If anybody has any questions, you can ask Beth or I. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can turn off your mute button and just ask it.
You could feel free if you would like to put your video on. We're welcome to see everybody's face as well. You don't have
Dominic has a question.
Hi, thank you for the awesome presentation. I really appreciate it. I just had a quick question. You made a comment earlier. I forget exactly what it said, but I was wondering, is there a preference? Because I'm a junior currently in undergraduate, and I'm applying like this cycle. Like I don't plan on taking any gap years. Is there a preference towards like people who are older, I guess, or like have more real life experience beyond college compared to someone who's not taking a gap year? Not just at your medical school in particular, but just like the general norm?
I don't think so. Beth, you can answer this as well. From other colleagues I've talked to at different medical schools, most medical schools fill their class with a mix. I think the average medical school student first year is about 24 years old. So, there's some that are coming right out of undergrad. There's some who may have gotten a master's and a post-bac. Post-bacs are big nowadays, but people do post-bacs for a variety of reasons. Some of them need to improve their undergraduate GPA. Some of them don't have the science prerequisites. So, people do that. Some of them are career changers. So they're older. They're, 28 years old. We're doing finance and now decided that's not their calling in life. Mm-hmm. But for us, and I think most of the medical schools out there, there's not really a preference whether you're coming right out of undergrad or not, because we really realize that people take gap years for various reasons. Some of them need a mental break from studying. Some of them need to raise money for medical school to pay tuition. Some of them are taking that gap year because they do need to get more experience. Maybe they didn't have much clinical experience or do any research or do any of that. So they really do need to gain some experience. But there's some students out of undergrad who have done all that already. And they have that experience and they're prepared. My best advice to you would be to talk to your pre-health advisor. If your pre-health advisor thinks that what you've done is good enough to go right in and apply to medical school, then I would, and you don't want to take a gap year, I would not take a gap year. I would just go right in.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Maria?
Hi, yes, I have two questions. I also wanted to say thank you so much for this information session. I thought it was super helpful. So one of my questions was, how prevalent are Zoom interviews becoming, like for this upcoming application cycle, if I'm applying and I'm looking to interview starting from October to January? How prevalent is that among schools in this country, given our situation with COVID? And then also, how do you make a more personal connection over Zoom? Because with virtual interviews, I feel like you don't get to express like body language or anything like that. Like you don't get as much of a sense of the applicant, at least like how I'm thinking it from an interviewer's perspective. So how would you make that personal connection?
Well, I'll address this. There's two parts to that question. First is whether we'll be continuing with virtual interviews. I think right now it's going to be a hybrid. I don't think at this point, I think the pre-health advisors are really keep advising their students. And from what I'm hearing from other medical schools, it's too early to know. I think in this pandemic world that we're living in, to plan more than 1 or 2 months out is very challenging. Schools that started in person are back virtual. Schools that started virtual are back in person. So I think what the pandemic has showed us is that you need to be really pliable and go any which way that the school will go. I think some schools would like, I've heard mixed. I really have heard mixed. I've heard some schools this past week said they do not want to go back to in-person interviews because what they have found is that on Zoom, their applicants are more comfortable. They don't have the stress of raising funds to fly into where the interview is. They don't need to rush and worry about mass transit to get to their interview on time. And they're finding the applicants are much more at ease on their interviews. Other schools want to take advantage of the fact that they have a beautiful campus and they want their applicants to come in and interview on campus. I think for certainly the remainder of this cycle, everything will primarily be virtual. I think for next year, there is a hope that there might be some in person. Some schools have adapted to this virtual world. I think it's really too early to tell. I don't know anybody that will make that determination at this point. They just don't know yet. And it's a fluid world that's constantly changing. In terms of your other question, how to make that personal connection on Zoom, I would say practice. Just as if you do, like you do mock interviews with people, and we do advise that, practice with anyone who knows you, who could ask you questions, put you at ease. So too, practice perhaps a Zoom interview with somebody. There is a skill of learning how to maintain eye contact on Zoom. I'm talking to you right now and I am looking right in your face and I can see who you are and I can see you smiling. And so there are other cues, whereas we don't see the whole body and see the pajamas that everybody's wearing on the bottom half, we can see the warmth that is coming through their face or the sincerity. And train yourself. This is why when I was discussing the setting for your interview, it's very important to have a good setting for those Zoom interviews. Make sure the TV is not on. Shut your phone off. You don't want distractions where the interviewer constantly sees your eyes going somewhere else. Because we don't know, are you looking at a different screen? Are you reading a text from your friend? That are the kind of cues that you pick up on Zoom. So right now, I have a wonderful feeling from speaking to you because you have actually been watching and listening through this whole exchange. So I do think that as interviewers have become more experienced in doing Zoom interviews, they're able to pick up those cues and those body language that they saw just like in person.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Does anybody else have any other questions? How much time is typically given to answer a question? How long should the answer be? Well, I can tell you that varies significantly. There are some interviews, we allot an hour for an interview, and there are some interviews where I'm almost at an hour and I'm like, wow, this person is very talkative. And then there's some people I interview in 15 minutes, I'm like, wow, I've asked every question and they've answered them so quickly. I really think that's a personality thing. You don't want to sound so short and so quick that you sound disinterested. You do want to give a thorough answer, but I really chalk that up to different people's personalities. Some people are more talkative than others. Some are more cut and dry. I don't view one or the other as a negative or positive, to be quite honest. It's more about what they say in that given period of time. In terms of the time to answer a specific question, the best advice I have there, first of all, is to pause after a question's answered. Sometimes people just they have a rehearsed answer, so they kind of blurt that answer out so quickly that, first of all, they might not have even be answering the question that was asked because they weren't really listening. They were just so rehearsed and ready to give their answer that they had prepared. So definitely listen to the question. It's okay to pause. I have people say to me all the time on interviews, that's a good question. Let me think for a moment. And that's fine. That shows to me maturity, that they're not just going to blurt something out. They're going to take a moment and think before they answer the question. And I appreciate that. So it's not, some people answer a question in a minute. Some people take 5 minutes to answer the question. I don't think, in general, I know I don't have a preference one or the other when it comes to the person that I'm interviewing. I chalk that up to just their personality and the way they go about it. And sometimes nerves can get the best of people in interviews, so they talk fast, and that may speed things up, but we're aware of that. And usually by the end of an interview, people slow it down a little bit because their nerves have calmed down a bit. Okay, the next question is, as a candidate with a stronger research background than a medical background, what would be the best answer to give to the question, why not research? Beth, do you want to handle that, or would you want me to?
I could start if you want to chime in anything afterwards. That's a great question. So I think many of our applicants will come in with a strength in one area. So for instance, if you have a strong research background, but perhaps you want to go to a school that will explore more the service aspect of medicine, then you need to just take that information and spin it. You should have a little bit of other things on that, on your experience list as well. But if you don't, what you want to always do is then take what you're perceiving as your weakness and make it a positive. Yes, I'm coming in with a lot of research, but that is preparing me to do the service that I need because I have a better understanding to whatever your research is in. And that's really a good word of advice for any weakness on that application. Explain it and use it towards a strength. And I think that is really how you could switch that focus if that is something you would like to do.
And let me just add to that, in terms of research, don't shy away from your research experience. Definitely highlight it. And how it can translate into a career as a physician, or maybe you've done some research on cancer and that's why you want to go and you want to be an oncologist, or you can really transition that into what drew you to medicine. And the other thing there is, I've interviewed many students who have said, I did research because I really like science and I had a great opportunity to do some research in different things that I was interested in, but what I felt I was missing was that patient interaction. And that's what led me down the path of wanting to be a physician. Yes, I love the science behind medicine and all that, but I want that patient interaction too, which is what's propelling me to medical school. So there's definitely ways you can answer that. And I don't think medical schools will frown upon a lot of research experience. You should have some, hopefully, clinical experience or some experience with patients, whether it's shadowing, scribe, whatever. But if you have much more research experience, I don't think that's a negative whatsoever. And I definitely think you can turn that into why you want to be a physician.
So I see there's a question here about Greek life, and if that has a stigma. I think also, let's see, same with if a student is deeply involved in activities related to church, would you encourage other involvement? Kelly, do you want to answer this one? You want to start with that one?
Sure. So in terms of Greek life, I know for us, and I'm sure these other med schools, we don't really have a viewpoint on Greek life as Greek life is good or Greek life is bad. Any of these experiences is what you did with them. And we do realize there's many philanthropic ventures that students involved in Greek life are involved with, different charities, different causes. So, just really highlight that aspect of it on your resume, more so than the traditional Greek life perhaps that people think of. But I don't think medical schools have a preconceived notion of Greek life, where if you've been involved in Greek life, we're going to view that as bad and nothing that's going to add to your resume. In regards to the faith-based activities, we have a lot of students at MSIH, who've done a lot of volunteer work with different faith-based organizations, whether it's Jewish faith-based, whether it's Christian faith-based, a lot of things where I have a student I interviewed the other day who did a lot over fall break this year in Appalachia. So and that was with a faith-based organization. We definitely do not frown upon that whatsoever. We realize that a lot of faith-based organizations of all different denominations do a lot of really good work in their communities and in the world. So any work you've done with a faith-based organization, at least from us, is viewed very positively. And I'm sure that's pretty much consistent across medical schools. That's not something we look down upon.
I'd like to just add one little note here that I see a consistent theme here coming through indirectly. And that's the questions that are asking is whether research, faith-based, Greek life, can that hurt us? And the answer is do what you're passionate about. Yes, it's important that you have an understanding and you have a demonstrated understanding, as Kelly mentioned, of what it is to be a physician, whether you're going to shadow somebody or scribe. But if your passion is research, if your passion is volunteering with faith-based organizations, do that, because that's ultimately what will make you a good physician, someone who is passionate about helping others and being a commitment to their field. So don't shy away from that. And again, use that as a strength on your application and who you are as a person.
And again, somebody just asked about being a scribe or shadowing a physician. Again, it's not so much that you've accumulated so many amount of hours. It's what you learned from those experiences. Perhaps you interacted with a patient who didn't speak the same language as the physician, and you saw some of the challenges they faced. Perhaps you saw a family member come in and distressed about, had a lot of questions, and how you saw the physician respond to that. So it's really your takeaways, how these experiences, whether as a scribe, as a shadow, what they've taught you, what you've learned from them, different things you've observed, things that you think could make the healthcare system better, things you really noticed about physicians that you were so in awe of their commitment to their patients. Different things like that really just, again, propelled you to medical school and taught you something throughout the process.
Dominic, you have another question?
Hi, yes, I did. I kind of going along with the similar theme about like things that might potentially turn away medical schools from applicants. Well, this is more a personal thing for me, but like I wrote in my personal statement, I'm still waiting for my health advising office to like review it and stuff, but I just want to get your guys' perspective on it. So like a big part of the reason why I want to be a doctor is like because I suffered a like traumatic, like I was in a car accident a couple years ago and I broke my neck and I had a traumatic brain injury. And a big part of that is like my working through my traumatic brain injury, like getting back to like a level, like this was in high school when I suffered the injury. Like I'm still like I'm academically like I'm doing fine. I'm not still suffering from like that, like the what happened, but like just mentioning that I had that injury, do you think that could be a potential like scare? I mean, my like academic record clearly shows I'm able to perform and I'm like getting the grades that I need. And like I haven't taken the MCAT yet, but like I likely will get the grades that I need. So like I'm kind of nervous about sharing that, I guess.
I can't tell you how many people are physicians because of a personal experience that they had. I don't think you should be afraid of sharing that. I think it will show that you have compassion from what it means to be the patient. And when you, as a future doctor, you will understand what it means to be on the other side. So I would not, I don't know if you disagree, Kelly, but I certainly don't think it would hurt your application. If anything, it probably could help you.
All right, yeah, because like my personal statement kind of like begins with that story, like as I go into it.
That's fine.
It's what motivated you. It tells the medical school something beyond just numbers about you and what's on your CV. And I think that's right. It really shows that you understand medicine from the side of a patient. You understand some of the challenges that patients face in getting back, getting healthy again. So I definitely do not think that's a negative. I know we would not view that as a negative. I think we would really, we embrace when people tell us stories like that and the challenges they've overcome. So, I definitely don't think that would be a negative. And I see your flag there. Let's hope for a better season next year for the Giants.
Yeah, I know. We fired our coach yesterday, so.
I saw.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Lawrence, do you have a question?
Yes. Hey, I didn't see you there across the quad. In a couple, actually, I think in about 2 weeks, we're looking at the end of the scoring of the STEP the step one exam. How do you see that impacting residency placements and you know, and how people assess international graduates going for American residencies?
I could start, Kelly. You could take it if you like. I think I lost my sound. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I believe what you're referring to also is the change in the step one to pass fail. Is that what you're referring to, how that will affect residencies?
Yes.
Okay. It's really too early to tell. We don't know. We don't envision it will impact us because we have a very, very successful rate from our school for the students going into U.S. residency. Last year, our match rate was 96%. I think all the schools are facing the same challenges. So everybody will be making this adjustment together. All the schools it's all new. None of the pre-health advisors know what to do with the pass-fail. It's never been out there before. So I think that learning curve and how it'll affect everybody will be consistent through the field. From our perspective, we're still preparing our students accordingly, and they're still doing well. So Kelly, if you want to add anything.
This is a very interesting question too, because I agree with Beth. I don't think anybody knows, how the chips are going to fall. But we have a few alumni who we've spoken to about this, who are on committees for their various hospitals that they work with in terms of residency. So they're selecting the residents for the hospitals that they work at. And they basically told us the same thing. They don't know how it's going to pan out, but they do think some of the things that are going to stand out a little more are obviously how your grades are, how your recommendations are, all those other things, but also something that might make you unique. So for us, I think that's actually a positive. Our global health training is extremely unique. It's more comprehensive than any other school in the world. And we have students and alumni tell us all the time, it's a great topic for interviews. And essays for medical school, for residency placement. So in essence, there's that distinguishing factor coming out of MSIH, that global health perspective, that global health training that will stand out perhaps a little more if everybody's just coming out with a pass-fail on the step one. But time will only tell. Again, we've talked to alumni who are on residency committees and they're not even sure where it's going to go yet. So time will tell.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. If that is it, we are going to conclude because we've already taken an extra 8 minutes of all of your time. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. This webinar was recorded, so I will send out a link to it for everyone if you want to listen again or if you want to look at the presentation. You will have my email and I'll put Beth's email on there as well. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. Beth and I really try to make this process as less stressful. I can't say stress-free because applying to medical school is not a stress-free process, but as painless as it can possibly be for you. We sympathize with the stress associated with this, and we try to make it as best as it can be. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to either of us. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great evening.
Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you for joining.